Sure. Hi, Lebo.
Hello, Mzu. How are you?
Good, thanks. How are you?
Good, thank you. Good, thank you. In
Thank you
these
for
strange and
joining me for
interesting times.
coffee. Thank you for joining me for coffee.
Happily.
Mine is strong and black. Yeah. Anyway, thanks, Lebo. Like I said, when I reached out, I was told I clear my throat a lot when I speak. I must be mindful. So I've been watching your post and following, how the lockdown has impacted artists and freelancers.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, the broader thing, being entrepreneurs, especially in the SMME space. So,
sure.
And I think also seeing the impact, there's a few people I know personally who are owed money. People are like, hey, can't pay you and all that kind of stuff. So I think I just wanted to hear it from you, and maybe just to give you the space to say, look, yes, this has triggered a lot of things and a lot of things that have been spoken about before, and things that have been directed towards the Minister of Arts and Culture. So in your own words, in terms of the impact and how messy it is and how much blood on the street there is, how is it?
So I think for us in the gig economy in South Africa shut down before the official lockdown. The gig economy shut down when the president pushed for social distancing, the social distancing mandate, which was trying to promote that we shouldn't have gatherings of more than 50 people, people should try to stay in isolation. That automatically killed the gigs, because then, if I can't perform for more than 50 people, how am I gonna do a theater production? How am I gonna do an event? How am I gonna do a speaking gig? How are we gonna do music festivals? But even prior to the social distancing mandate in South Africa, we were already the performers in the gig economy and other people in the gig economy, technicians, sound engineers, directors, writers, production people, we were already impacted by the international lockdowns because many of us tour, So there are a lot of South African artists who, like me, are not just earning a living in South Africa, we spend a lot of time traveling, in order to feed our families. So once the lockdown became entrenched in Europe, in the United States, in Asia, we started to feel the ripple effect of it. Tours started to get shut down. International productions started to get canceled or postponed. And then, within a matter of weeks, days, it hit us in South Africa. For me, I went into survival mode. Which meant that now the urgency of chasing outstanding invoices was really amplified. So, I think one of the big things about this crisis is that it exposes how dysfunctional the system has been for a very long time. And of course, these issues are not unique to artists or to creatives in the gig economy. The gig economy, as you rightly said in the beginning, it includes people who run SMMEs. It includes all freelance and contract workers. It includes people who are self-employed, It includes the auntie who's selling burrowbus rolls outside the gig. You know what I mean? It's everybody. It's the sister who does hair. It's the ladies who do wardrobe. It's the guys who clean up the theater. It's the people who sell tickets. It's that whole value chain that got shut down, So under normal circumstances, even our normal was highly problematic and toxic, in the sense that when the lockdown happened, I found myself sitting with about 5 outstanding invoices, that I immediately needed to scramble now to get on it and to get people to pay. And I'm talking about everybody from, communications people who run their own companies who have booked me for events, to the biggest companies in this country, to the biggest banks in this country, who have booked me as an artist, as a speaker, to come and do an event. And it took me 2.5, almost 3 weeks to get 4 out of the 5 of those invoices on it, All of my debit orders bounced, with the exception of, the bond. I'm a breadwinner in my family, so and I work full time with my mom. My mother does my bookings and my management. So I mean, I'm effectively taking care of. Well, let me say, I financially provide for multiple households because we have an ecosystem, of kind of mutualistic benefit, and I mean, this ecosystem also allows me to be able to be an artist. I as I said, I travel, I tour. My family assists me with caring for my children, so I have family that stays with me so that my house is looked after when I'm not around, such things like that. You know what I mean? We it's an extended family network, and I think for many African people, this is a reality, that I mean, what we kind of call black tax, but that really is Black people using our income to provide for people in the most unequal society on earth. So instead of undoing inequality, you've got Black middle class, or even high income earners, who are paying for that gap in between the haves and the have-nots by providing for the people in our own immediate circles, So for every middle class Black person that you see, we are middle class in an island of family, networks, people, community, employees who also rely on us, in the same way that we rely on them, Sure. But that system in and of itself is very toxic, and we've allowed it to go on because of survival. How do you challenge the institutions that you're working for to transform when you're relying on them not just to feed you, but also to feed the people around you? I think this is why we've kept silent. This is also why we've kept silent about the fact that it's taken us this pandemic for us to really speak about how unfair, how unjust it is for freelance contract workers to be subject, and people who run their own companies, SMMEs, self-employed people, to be subject to irregular, insensitive payment processes by the clients that we work for, So, I mean, there's only so much that I can do to protect my labor, right? I mean, I sign my, I create an invoice that is a binding contract between me and my client. I protect things like my intellectual property, recordings, and whatnot, to ensure that at least, the work that I'm sharing with the client is protected. I demand 50% upfront. Most of my clients will honor that. Some of them are unable to, depending on, the negotiation, and most of the time I do give leeway to clients who cannot pay 50% upfront because, I mean, I'm a businesswoman and I want the business, So, but then afterwards, then we find ourselves stuck in these hectically bureaucratic processes, supplier chain processes, vendor forms. And a lot of the time, these are not things that are negotiated with us upfront, These are things that we get told about afterwards, now when we're demanding payment, So I think now, because, the wheels of production have like ground to a halt, it's exposing all of these issues, that the system has been dysfunctional for a very long time, Under normal circumstances, I always am sitting with multiple outstanding invoices. That's just the way that it's been. That's how I've always worked. And I kind of mentally think about that money as like a savings, and I will deliberately take on more work in the interim just to have cash flow, So I'm on a treadmill of constantly working, chasing money, working, chasing money, working, chasing money, in between, using my money to, in addition to, supporting my family, but also like using my money to finance my own projects and, creative endeavors, you know what I mean? And it's a very dysfunctional system. It's an extremely dysfunctional system. And I mean, I say this as an artist who's been a full-time artist for 20 years, you know what I mean? In a country where to be in my position, one is actually very lucky to be in my position. And even my position is extremely dysfunctional, So people have found it's like the world has been ripped out from under the gig economy and the creative industries, and you, I mean, in fact, you are lucky if you're sitting with outstanding invoices that you have to chase, because that means at least at some point there's income that's going to come in, What if you're a day-to-day worker or a week-to-week worker? What if you own a salon? You know what I mean? Exactly. What if you're selling food outside outside of the gig? You know what I mean? What if you're a driver working for a production, you know? So it's a terrifying situation. And unfortunately, you know, our government really doesn't understand how our sector works, how practitioners are earning a living, how payment processes keep us scrambling for money, you know, and just the kind of injustice that is embedded in the system, you know, if you're a working creative artist or self-employed person, or, you know, a business owner, a small business owner. So I mean, when the social distancing mandate was announced, and it immediately affected the gig economy, the minister had a meeting with a number of stakeholders in the creative sector, and came up with a strategy that includes providing 150 million rands from the National Lotto's first quarter budget, you know. That money is supposed to provide relief for not just the arts sector, but also the sports sector. I mean, 150 million it's a minuscule budget for two sectors. That is money that would run maybe a couple of festivals in this country, to be very honest with you, you know. And now that's money that has to provide relief, not just for artists, but also for athletes, you know, which is, I mean, it's very impractical. The other strategy that was put forward was, and this was in the time of social distancing, using existing state-owned theaters as platforms for performers to share work, and then for that work to be recorded and streamed, you know, so that people could watch it. When we were social distancing, that was a great idea, you know, but now that we are in a lockdown, we don't have access to the theaters, you know. So after the president announced the official lockdown, you know, then the following day, the Minister of Arts and Culture, Minister Nathi Mthethwa, gave a response, because the president did not address the creative sector in his social distancing mandate speech. He also did not address the creative sector in the lockdown speech, you know. And that to me was very worrisome. And I mean, when I spoke to people about it, you know, people who have worked within government, you know, were saying that means that he was not given information by the ministry that is responsible for that. So the following day, after the lockdown, the president gave the speech announcing the 21-day lockdown, of which we're now on day 11. Minister Nathi Mthethwa gave a speech detailing the strategy that they put together after the social distancing mandate. So, I mean, those rules don't apply anymore, you know? We cannot be using theaters to stream our work because we can't get out of the house, we can't access theaters.
Yes.
Exactly. But it kind of shows you it shows you the level of awareness and you know, the responsiveness, you know, like he gave the strategy basically a week late, and it doesn't apply, and the money that is being put forward in the strategy is too little. Right now, we have been asked there have two briefs that I've seen that have come out from the DAC. One is asking creatives to apply for funding for projects, products that can live online, that can also be profitable, you know? I mean, all of us have had to shift our work online, you know what I mean? I'm doing interviews online, I'm doing performances online, I'm sharing work online, but I mean, very little of it is profitable, you know what I mean? These are new models that we are creating, you know?
So basically, and situation now, right?
Right. I mean, we're trying to, as best as we can, use the platforms that we have at our disposal to be able to share our creativity more than anything, just to be able to connect with people and to stay sane. You know, an artist who is not creating is gonna go through a lot of anguish. You know, so I mean, almost immediately, musicians, poets, performers started sharing work online around the world, right? How do you figure out how to make that profitable within a matter of days, you know? And these are the proposals that that's the proposal that the DAC asked for. The other proposal that the DAC requested, which the deadline is today, the 6th of April, they want us to quantify with evidence how much work we have lost, you know? Hi, Unati. Hey, big girl. How are you?
It's
hey. Is that Alu? No! Alu Nam, that is big
I
boy.
don't have any chance. I always have a guest presenter.
Oh, hello, Alu. Wow, you're such a apula, yeah. Apula. Is it nice? It's yummy, ne?
That's in the point. Yeah. So
You're a big boy. I'm so happy to see you. You're so beautiful. Look at you. Oh my gosh. Wow. Okay. So then the other request that the GAC put out is, I can hear you because you're a big guy.
Look, I'm yummy.
okay, but
Is it yummy?
yeah.
So the other request that they put through is asking us to quantify with evidence how much work we are losing for the period that includes from the time the shutdown lockdown started in March all the way to June. I don't know if the intention behind that is to cover all of those costs. I don't think that they can, but I think the value of this exercise is really figuring out how much money the sector has lost, you know?
I think it's to check the impact.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's important really to like aggregate that so that people also understand like how much money is generated by this sector, how economically viable we are, how many people we are taking care of, you know?
Yes.
I mean, for me, this it's exposed a number of issues. Firstly, the problem with the payment processes. Secondly, the fact that the Department of Arts and Culture does not have a seat within the financial cluster, you know? So, I mean, we are a sector that generates billions, but we don't have the ability to sit directly and negotiate with the banks or with the financial sector. Other countries have offered relief in the form of bond freezes, rent freezes, and utility freezes with no interest, you know, from big countries with big economies like France to, you know, African countries like Uganda, you know? Why hasn't South Africa, the most unequal society on earth, done that? The best that has been offered by our financial institutions is to say, oh, we can do a payment delay for you, you know, you can waive your bond or rent, whatever, for 3 months, but the interest is going to be compounded. So how much more are you going to pay? You know, I mean, this is a global crisis. It's a global pandemic. It's not like government doesn't understand what our economic dynamics are. You know, this is a very unequal society where you've got income earners, you know, who are providing for multiple people, multiple households. You know what I mean? You shouldn't be in a situation where you have to choose between rent and food or rent and medicine. You know, right now we're in this period of what they're calling the calm before the storm. You know, South Africans have responded quite well to social distancing, to the lockdown. People are staying at home. The numbers are not what they expected, as high as they were projected, that it was projected they were going to be at this time, you know? So people are listening and we're in a relatively good place, but that doesn't mean that the numbers are not going to increase. My worry is not necessarily, I mean, I am worried right now about finances. I am worried right now about how I'm going to survive. I am worried about how I'm going to take care of my family. But I'm also extremely worried about 3 weeks from now when the numbers have skyrocketed and this flu is concentrated in poor, Black, high density areas, you know? What is going to happen then, you know? Because those areas are the spaces where, I mean, I'm suburban, you know what I mean? I live in the suburbs, I live in a previously white area, but my family is in Soweto, you know what I mean? You know, my family goes to church in Soweto, you know? All of us have a foothold in Black communities because that's where we come from, you know what I mean? So if when this thing peaks, you know, the effect that it is going to have on us is it's going to be mind-blowingly tragic and painful. And I worry about how our government is not making the connections between, you know, what has happened to us economically and what is still coming. We are not going to be able to, how are we going to buy meds? How are we going to buy food for our families? How are we going to be able to help people?
It's very scary, Lebo. It's really scary. I think, you know, there is a great sense of not being ready for what's coming. and a bit of not being in touch with the impact that as you say, the industry has been this way even before the pandemic. Which tells me that maybe if we can put it bluntly, we have people who don't care. Not
Very much so.
Not necessarily people who don't know. Do you understand? Yes, Superman.
Hey, Superman.
Taking over the show, Nep.
It's okay. He's a star. He's a performer.
In as much as there's that reality and that prospect, in your space, and I think maybe within your personal space, I understand the industry and all that. It sounds like you've already started doing some things in terms of adapting. You spoke about the online situation and all that. For the long term, because also there's this likelihood that we are thinking 21 days. Okay, now it's day 11, but we should possibly think 3 to 6 months.
Absolutely.
How do you see the impact or the changes within the industry, and how one needs to adapt to remain relevant and obviously to make a livelihood?
So, I mean, when we talk about just the creative sector within the gig economy, we're talking about performers, we're talking about the people that you see on stage, and we're talking about everybody who supports the value chain behind. And that is writers, directors, producers, the people who build the stage, the people who control the props, the people who build the lights, the people who transport all of the technical equipment. You're talking about drivers who transport cast and crew. You're talking about caterers. You're talking about people who feed people. You're talking about wardrobe and seamstresses. You're talking about publicists. You're talking about communication specialists, and you're talking about arts managers and agents and eventing companies. The value chain is massive. You're talking about the people who run the theaters, the people who sell the tickets. The entire model is going to have to change, like as in right now, for people to be able just to get work out there. I'm not even talking about profitability yet, because I don't know how we can make this situation profitable when people are scrambling for money to just survive. I don't even know if it's ethical for government to even be asking that at this stage, given how dire things are. All the artists that I know, including myself, all the freelancers that I know, are scrambling to get their outstanding invoices in and are budgeting that money to last them over that period that you're speaking about, and I mean, for many of us, trying to budget that kind of money over such a long period is an impossibility, Hence, it's really important to put it squarely on the shoulders of government to understand why we need rent, bond, and utility freezes. We are heading towards winter. You cannot be throwing people out of their homes. We need to be staying in houses that are lit, in houses that are warm, because people are still going to be having to use the money that they have just to pay for food, to pay for meds, to try to cover the gaps, while they're not getting income. So, I mean, and without rent, bond, and utility freezes, you're basically saying to people, you're stuffed. We don't care. In fact, capitalism, the wheels of capitalism are going to turn as usual, as they always have, even in the middle of a pandemic. And to me, that kind of shows like we've got one of the worst forms of capitalism, I think, in the world. It is deeply insensitive, and it shows that the moral and ethical origins of it are rooted in apartheid and in colonialism, because we haven't really escaped that violence. It's like people are just an inexhaustible resource that can be sucked dry even when the world is falling apart. So I mean, in terms of adapting and being flexible, I trust our community to adapt and to be flexible. Almost immediately, people started posting stuff online. Almost immediately, people started collaborating and doing interesting things. I've seen, there are artists who I have not seen live in years, but I've seen them online in the last week, sharing work, for free, you know what I mean? Sometimes even a couple of times in the week, which is amazing, right? Because this is who we are. That's what we do, you know? So, I mean, if you're talking about people who need to be flexible, agile, responsive, innovative, come up with solutions in the time of a pinch, you know what I mean? Come up with solutions in very difficult times, you know? That's what we do. That's who we are, you know? People are consuming more culture right now than they probably ever consumed. You know what I mean? This is a time, and also people are looking for a particular kind of culture. People are looking for meaning right now because people are anxious, people are depressed. The whole world is worried right now. The whole world has been thrown into complete disarray. So the bubblegum pop culture, you know, that has been pervasive and forced down people's throats, not that it's a bad thing. It also has its escape, its place. I also like escapism. I enjoy twerking. I enjoy laughing, right? But people are also looking for something more substantial right now. They're looking for something that can feed the soul and feed the mind to help us find solutions to get through this. You know, people are consuming books, people are consuming poems, people are watching motivational speakers, people are watching spiritualists and healers, people are watching movies and content that has depth because they need it right now, you know. So this is the time when people are sitting in their houses consuming artistic products. You know, if you never knew our value, imagine trying to get through a lockdown without us, you know. I trust us to come up with solutions. My worry about this space is, you know, how many people have access to the internet? I mean, we are sitting here having this conversation on our laptops, you know, we've got Wi-Fi, right? I mean, in this country, it's only what, like 10% of the people, maybe 15% of the people at a push that can participate in that, you know? There are many more people who have phones that can access like WhatsApp and Facebook, you know? Or you know what I mean? So how do we take what we do, tailor make it into kind of bite-sized chunks and products that can live in spaces that our people can access, you know? How do we take those products and allow them to live in a multiplicity of languages, you know, so that more people can be able to access them, right? This is the stuff that we are trying to think of and trying to imagine, you know? But that also takes time. And we're also human and we're processing. Like people, you know, the whole planet right now is scared and depressed and in its pajamas, you know, eating too much, running back and forth to the fridge. You know, the whole planet is struggling with insomnia. The whole planet is trying to figure out how we're going to keep these kids like fed and watered, you know, and try to, you know, make sure that they're mentally stimulated. My children are addicted to technology right now. You know what I mean? So it's like all bets are off. We're trying to process this emotionally. And then you're putting the pressure on people to come up with profitable models now? Really? How? Okay, if you want us to do that, then at least meet me halfway. Let me know that I'm going to be able to stay in my house and keep the lights on. You know, I'll figure the rest out. You know what I mean? But you can't now ask me to make a profit, pay bills as usual while I'm not earning income. How? Like, the situation is messy now and we're only 11 days into it, maybe like 3 weeks to a month into the collapse of the gig economy, right? So, I mean, you know, like debit orders have just gone off a couple of days ago. You know what I mean? Mine bounced, right? How are we going to get through another 2-3 months like this without some form of relief?
Yeah, there's no way.
There's no way. If people know that they can at least stay in their houses, you know, and that we're going to have lights, you take off a tremendous... Yeah, it's that we're gonna have lights, we're gonna have water, and we can stay in our homes. After, you know, at least if that is secure, the rest we can try to figure out. When you take that burden away, you know, then creatives at least have the mental space to be able to create, you know. But I'm really not. I'm not so worried about us being flexible because that's who we are, you know. That's who we are. That's how these art forms survive. I mean, poetry has been in existence from the time human beings invented language up until now, you know? And I mean, it lives online now. So I'm not worried about poetry. I'm not worried about the arts. They will always adapt, you know? I'm worried about people's basic ability to survive.
Yeah. Well, you've said a lot. That's got my thought process going all sorts of directions. Yeah, you've given me a lot to think about, to be quite honest. And I think you've got a good idea in terms of the work that we do as BrownSense. And obviously we also looking at how do we play our part. So what you've given me now has given me some bones to chew on, some meat to chew on.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think about stuff that maybe we can work towards, but obviously we are not the only ones, or that we are not the only ones who can do this. Sure, yeah, I have to be honest. It's a lot. So let me tell you what's been going on my side first, in terms of what I've been observing. You know, other people on my timeline and all that. So initially the first couple of days, so the kids were with my parents, school holidays. I'm flying solo. I'm like, hey, you know.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
I'm winning, you know. So then the president announces, then I send a message to my parents. I'm like, yo, bring the kids back. Because the first thing I thought was like, I don't know how long. I know he says 21 days, but I was like, nah, I've got a feeling it's going to go way beyond. So I like, bring the kids back. At least I know that they're with me. Mina, I'll figure things out, you know, whether it's like sleeping 2 hours, whatever the thing, but whatever that needs to get done will get done. And then the first few days, you know, it's very hard to push myself to get to do some work. Yeah. Then I'm getting emails, do this, we need this by our end of business. We need this by end of business today. So in my mind, I'm like, in what time zone is that end of business? I hope it's anyway. Then I start consuming, and I like the part that you touched on about what people are doing at home, right? So I start consuming content, you know. So for me, it varies from art, well, be it music, film or whatever, but also to business content. And the more I like do this, I'm like, okay, you know what? And this is me, but also I appreciate that there's people who've got their own struggles and they deal with them the way that they deal with them. And I'm like, okay, it's either I can see your face has disappeared.
Somebody's trying to call me. I'm so sorry. I should have put the phone on airplane mode. But if I put it on airplane mode, will the Wi-Fi still work?
I don't know, to be honest.
You know what? I'll just decline them. Second half. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So I think for me, what it took was, you know, however long the period, be 21, 3 months, 6 months, or whatever, and, you know, God willing, I come out alive and healthy. How do I want to come out? You know, what version do I want to be at the end of that period? Do you understand? Do I want to be the version that's like, I'm going to comfort eat and add a bit more kilos, you know, a bit more misery and all that? Or am I the kind that's like, okay, try to stick to your schedule. So if you're waking up at this time, keep to that, clean the house, take a shower, feed the kids, morning nap for the little guy, prepare lunch, work in between. And I've found that to be helpful, but I'm not expecting it to be the same for other people. Just something that's worked for me. So the stuff that you've touched on around consumption of the ads, I've been seeing a lot more people on my timeline, for instance, sharing what programs or what shows are you guys watching on Netflix. I never used to see that a lot. I don't know about your timeline. And that
mine too. Yes, definitely.
On their phones, like a lot more than they usually are. And I think this kind of content is what is needed. But what do you? Okay, I've got a situation.
There's an anarchist. Is there mutiny? An insurrection of the people.
You know. Yeah, Unati, can you come in here, please, Nana? Okay, cool. Done. There you go. I lost my train of thought. Oh yeah, so
hey, toddlers, man. They're hectic.
They will humble you, these guys. Yeah, so I think what I would like maybe as a parting shot, Lebo, is if let's pretend our minister cares, our leadership care enough to listen. and maybe they gave us an ear, they gave you an ear, and what maybe just briefly you've touched on them in some of the stuff that you've said earlier. For the long term, okay, we are thinking, yes, we need short-term solutions for right now, and I think funding is one of those, relief funding.
Yes.
But
Yes.
for the long term, the industry has been toxic, as you say. There's a group I was added to on Facebook. I don't know if you're part of it. I'm not sure if I should mention them, but it's all about the arts. And what I've been seeing, it's artists trying to mobilize themselves.
Oh yes. Yeah. For the arts, yeah.
For the arts, I think, yeah. And so my first few days there, I tried to like, okay, what's the end game? You understand? What are you trying to get to? Because we've seen this before many times, but what are you trying to get? What are you trying to, and how are you trying to get there? Because we must always remember how the government is here to do what will keep them in office for the next term. So if anything is going to shake the tree in such a way that it's going to mess with that, it's going to be hard for them to do that. So what is it that as artists can be done within artists, by artists, for artists? And then what should government be doing if we were to be, maybe, for lack of a better word, naive enough to believe that they will do something meaningful? And then also the other stakeholders involved, what should be done? Which, okay, but for to long term, this thing needs to change. And how do we do that? What do we put in place to make sure that we get to that space, at least close in to that space where this conversation is not happening next year or the year after?
I love the way that you phrased that question and that analysis with the different tiers. I think for creatives, the tool that we have at our disposal, that enables us to work, our creativity, our innovation, our various disciplines, it's more necessary now than ever. Transformative work is transformative because it transforms you first and foremost as the creator. I cannot write a poem that's going to have a transformative impact on people unless that poem first and foremost transforms me. So it's time also for us to create. I think for people who own their own businesses, for creatives, we know what it is to spend time alone. We know what it is to be by ourselves. We know what it is to go into our holes and to create and to come out and, to manifest what it is that we've been building, right? So when the lockdown was announced, aside from, the really heavy financial concerns that I've had, which have brought me to tears, there was another part of me that was kind of like, wow, okay, so this is the time that I can use to finish my book. This is the time that I can use to do my recording. This is the time that I can use to start experimenting online. This is the time that I can use to get my YouTube channel back up, that I can play with on Instagram, immediately. The creative self is like a child, you know what I mean? And it's eternally optimistic and eternally playful. And it must be fed, in order to remain that way, Hence, an artist who's not creating becomes very dark because that child literally dies. It's like a plant that doesn't get watered, So I think we need to remember in this time to water our own plants, because that plant is going to give life and sustenance and oxygen to so many people during this time, and water your plant however you see fit in the ways that you understand. My self-care doesn't look like your self-care, whatever are the things that anchor you, that inspire you, that allow you to remain optimistic, that allow you to remain connected to yourself and to the source of your inspiration. Those are the things that at the bare minimum you need to be able to maintain during this time, and a real true commitment to them and to your creativity. I think that's going to get us through. And it's for me, that's why it was very reassuring to see almost immediately artists start going online and sharing their stuff, because that shows okay, that impetus to create is still alive. And what's exciting, is I mean, being a part of the gig economy, you know, that commodifies art, you know, being an artist who earns a living as an artist, you know, it's such a demanding, sometimes demoralizing space, you know. I've often looked at my art, you know, just as a means of survival, you know, like economic survival, not as, and forgetting that it's a tool of spiritual survival, you know. So now that the money has been, you know, shut down, now that the wheels of capitalism have ground to a halt, you know, we're back to looking at our creativity as just creativity that needs to be shared. And there's something very pure and special and loving and affirming about that, you know. It shows that what we do is eternal, you know. And I think artists really need to remember that, you know. So for government, I would say, for government, I think I would love to see the Department of Arts and Culture release the figures of how many people are sustained by the gig economy in this country, you know, how many people belong to the sector as workers, you know, and as people who earn a living within the sector. And then beyond that, how many families, how many individuals are connected to that pipeline, you know, just because those individuals within it support them and provide for them, you know. Then we'll get a true sense of how many people have been affected by this crisis, you know. I think that the Department of Arts and Culture needs to lobby the financial sector on our behalf to freeze rents, freeze bonds, not payment delays with compound interest at the end, frozen. We are in this together. I get that we were already in an economic downturn, you know. We've had 3 big downgrades. I mean, the fact that Moody's downgraded us in the middle of this also, like, fuck them, like, for real. That is really wicked and evil and just nasty and spiteful. And I hope we never forget that, you know. That's a, that's almost as bad as like the vaccine thing, you know. But anyway, okay, that's another subject, right? We were already in an economic downturn, and that economic downturn had everything to do with the rampant corruption that we've been experiencing in this country for a very long time, you know. So I think government also needs to be accountable to itself for that the financial position that we find ourselves in as this pandemic unfolds is because of you, you know. So the very least that you can do is to offer relief mechanisms, freeze bonds, freeze rentals, freeze utilities. We're already in debt. Second half, we're already, all of us are going to have to those of us who are still standing and still healthy after this, thank God, I hope, will be the ones who have to do the work of rebuilding. So we're already in it with the banks. We're already in it with the financial institutions, you know. We're still going to all have to do that work together. Freeze rents, freeze bonds, freeze utilities right now. DAC needs to be lobbying for that right now. Going forward, the DAC, the creative sector, needs to have a seat in the financial cluster so that we're not speaking to them from some cloud out in the sky. You know what I mean? We are an income generating sector that sustains millions of people, millions of households, millions of Black people, millions of young people all across this country, you know? There's no reason why we shouldn't be able to speak directly to DTI or to the Ministry of Finance or the Reserve Bank or whichever relevant ministry, you know, that we need to talk to be able to unpack, you know, the systemic problems that we're dealing with right now, you know? If government wants to show goodwill towards artists, freelancers, people in the gig economy, people who own their own businesses, SMMEs, right now, government, you honor your own outstanding invoices. Honor them now. Pay the outstanding invoices that are sitting with you. And then you have a leg to stand on when it comes to motivating corporate South Africa to change their payment processes in this period so that these funds can be released, you know? The corporate and government right now is sitting with funds for services that have already been rendered. You know, people are talking about supply chains and this thing, vendor forms, and you need to be registered and what, all the stuff. I mean, right now, these companies are working, and government itself is also working on skeleton staff. The people in finance are working from home like you and I, you know what I mean? So, I mean, the system already is abnormal, but you know that you're sitting with this money, and you know that this money is the difference between life and death for people. Honor outstanding invoices now, you know? Going forward, my mentor, who was the former poet laureate who passed away 2 years ago. He used to be an advisor within the Department of Arts and Culture to the minister. He was an advisor for 10 years and was also kicked out of his job unceremoniously. So, I mean, what government does to people, it also does to people who work within government, to good people who work within government. You know, there's nobody who's more frustrated in South Africa right now than somebody who is working in the public sector, who cares about their job, who's not corrupt, who's skilled, and who wants to make a contribution. Those people are stopped at every turn. You know, I've seen it with my mother, I've seen it with friends, I saw it with my mentor. And one of the things that he used to say, you know, all the time is that we have a Bill of Rights that guarantees the right to access culture, you know, to be able to we have the right to culture, which is not a small thing, you know. We have the right to culture in the same way that we have the right to health, in the same way that we have the right to dignity, in the same way that we have the right to freedom of movement. You know, these are strong foundational rights in our democracy. The Department of Health doesn't exist to regulate doctors. It exists to provide healthcare to the people, to make healthcare accessible to the people. Healthcare workers are the tools and the vehicles that are used to make healthcare accessible to the people. And I think for a long time, we've been thinking about it ass backwards when it comes to culture. You know, the DAC treats itself like a production house. You know, you're putting out briefs for online products that can generate a profit. That's not your job, in fact. You know, your job is to make culture accessible. Why don't we have galleries in poor communities? Why don't we have theaters in poor communities? Why don't we have cultural centers in poor communities? There should be cultural centers within walking distance of every South African where you can access, where your children, where Alu can go for a dance class or learn to write poetry, you know, where we can see, sorry, that was another call. There should be cultural centers in poor communities where people can be able to access cultures. And this is not something, again, it's not a pie in the sky dream. Other countries with similar economies, even poorer than us, are doing it. Latin America, in Cuba, Colombia, you know, they really value culture. They have cultural centers where ordinary people can go. You know, you've got kids as young as Alu who are learning ballet. You've got 17-year-olds who are incredible jazz musicians through publicly sustained cultural platforms, centers where these things are available. You know, it's not rocket scientists. It's not rocket science. Why don't we have artists in residence in school? Why does every primary school and high school and university in South Africa have residence programs where people like me can go and tell your children and our own children, you know, what it means to be an artist, what this art form is, how we make it, why it's important, you know? So, I mean, I think DAC needs to do some very serious reflection and introspection on what its job truly is. If DAC was truly doing its job, you know, then the artists have been doing our job. We've been creating, you know, create the spaces where we can access our people, and we will fill those spaces with art. If you don't want to make this art accessible to people, then I have to ask myself why, you know, because the art and creativity are essential to a critically thinking society. We have a lot of trauma and damage that we need to undo from apartheid. You know, we are deeply wounded people, and art and creativity allow us to get inside of those wounds and to, like, you know, like I said before, like, you know, work is not going to transform the audience unless it transforms you first. You know, the genesis of my own creativity is me trying to work through my own stuff, my own ancestral stuff, my own trauma, my own issues, you know, and then I give it to the people, and then it also serves and helps and uplifts and heals the people, you know. So if you don't want people to be able to access art like that, then why? Why don't you want a critically thinking, self-reflective, healed, creative Black population? Why? Whose agenda are you serving by not allowing people to access the tools that are going to help us to expand our minds, innovate, and heal?
Sure. Lebo? Let's leave it there. This is powerful. Can this be one of many that we do? No?
I hope so. I've had a lot of fun. Thank you so much. It's necessary. Where is this going to live?
Excuse me? Or where is it
Where
going to be?
where is this? Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so it's going to be, I'll do it on the group on Facebook, but we also have another URL that I'll send you that we've only created on, what's today? Today is Monday, no? It feels like
Yeah,
it's,
today's Monday. Hey, the
feels like
Corona lockdown, all the days are bleeding into it. I know exactly how you feel. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, so I'll send you both links, but I will take
Okay.
you on the one I'll post in the group. So I'll send you the footage via a WeTransfer link because it's going to be
Thank you.
Gary, and then Facebook, and then the other URL.
Wonderful.
Yeah. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I appreciate this. I
No,
appreciate
thanks for
this so much.
Cool. So I'll be in touch, then.
Okay, fantastic. Hugs and kisses to the babies.
I will. You too, man.
Thank you. Bye.